Well, it's the end of RSA week, and I've got one more flight and I'll be home. But it's a good time for us to recap on all the craziness that we saw. I think this year there were over 5,000 vendors in all the halls and nearby buildings hawking their wares. And it looks as though, we have a lot of the same themes that we saw over the last couple of years replay themselves. But one of the things that I continue to see amongst our customers and the folks I spoke with is just a level of complexity that they're seeing in their environment. And then two, they don't have enough people. And then three, they don't have enough skilled people. And then, this from the operating environment, that things are happening at a far greater pace, and the volume, variety, and the velocity of the data being generated, the threat environment itself lends itself to a tremendous amount of complexity.
Yeah, and this was my 13th year in a row at RSA now. So it's talking about the trends, 13 years ago, looking just at the mentality around RSA and the security industry back then, it was quite different than today. I mean, the complexity wasn't really a theme back then, right? And that's virtually every CISO, every network admin, SOC admin that I talked to at RSA, they're all grappling with the same problem of complexity.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty telling that when I looked at the research from the law enforcement agencies, right? There's one factoid that resonates throughout my career in the last 20 odd years, which is that right now we're spending upwards to $130 billion in network security as an industry, right? And that 9 out of 10 attacks that lead to data breaches can still be mitigated through simple to intermediate controls, and that some 80% of all the data breaches are really identified by the victims and law enforcement. And what's startling in that statistic is that despite all the spending we've done, the amount of hiring we've done, the amount of integration, is that teams are still struggling because they're overwhelmed. I mean, if only 20% of the data breaches are actually identified by the internal security team or the service provider, it really shows the level of complexities that people are facing. So I think that the big trends I saw this year that bode well for the industry are automation and orchestration, right? So I think that platform consolidation leads to the discussions about integration. So I think we're getting there in things like what we're doing at Fortinet with our fabric. But I'm also beginning to see the implementation of AI and artificial intelligence and its subset of machine learning and artificial neural networks to enhance the visibility, right?
Again, going back to that threat landscape discussion. So, I've been at FortiGuard Labs for over 15 years. FortiGuard Labs has been, born with Fortinet from day one in 20 years ago now when Fortinet was founded. And again, looking at the complexity of the threat landscape, I think, Jonathan, you know this, you've heard me talk about this a lot, and there's more talking in the industry about things like offensive automation, the potential of weaponization of machine learning and artificial intelligence that's on the horizon. I mean, we're always looking at what are the bad guys going to do next in their shop, right? And so we have to be prepared, and certainly I think what you talked about coming from your side, what you've seen on the security orchestration end and automation, that's good to keep up to where we are now, but we need to do better in terms of how we detect these threats. I mean, they're becoming very sophisticated nowadays. Every security vendor is a target when it comes to the black hats or the bad guys. So yeah, we need the right tools to do that, right?
Yeah, and the operating environment's more complex as well. As we move into industrial applications and OT environments, what we thought were air gaps, right, really is somewhat challenged. And so I was really glad to see the launch of our FortiAI appliance form factor of artificial intelligence that allows us in the operating teams to deploy an instance of AI into an air gapped environment that is self-contained and self-learning. And I think that goes a long way towards enhancing the productivity of SOCs. One of the things I really liked about FortiAI is the research that was done, and it shows that on average, the deployment of FortiAI is the equivalent in terms of productivity of up to 5 security analysts, right? And so if you can't find security skill set, do better with what we've got today and to automate the more mundane tasks, if you will. The initial triage, right?
Yeah, and this is a theme, another theme. So we talked about complexity, number one. Number two, this is a huge theme we've been talking about for years now, and certainly Ken, our CEO, has been speaking about this at the World Economic Forum. It's something that leaders worldwide are speaking of. There's no secret. There's a lack in skilled professionals out there. How do we scale? So I was going back to FortiGuard Labs and the threat landscape. We're getting north of 100 billion potential threat events coming in a day. If we're just looking at vulnerabilities and exploits, we just published our Q4 threat landscape report, and we're looking every second, every minute at these threats incoming, and we get over 10 million exploitation attempts a minute coming in, right? So how do you scale with that? Even at FortiGuard Labs, we're over 235 headcount in FortiGuard Labs. For a network security vendor, this is the largest global SOC, but people don't scale up to the amount of volume that we're seeing with a growing attack surface. So if I look back to what we've done with FortiGuard AI, we actually were using this tool. This is a tried and tested tool. We've used this internally with our world-class analysts for over 5 years to be able to do that heavy lifting. Really use this, Forti AI as a tool, right? A powerful tool to reduce our cycles, to allow us to be able to scale. And now this is being offered to customers, so I'm really excited about that too.
Yeah, I think that's a huge differentiator. One of the things I noticed when I was walking around all the different booths and getting my tchotchkes, by the way, I think the most impressive tchotchke I saw was a bottle opener. It's the most useful one. And so everyone talks about AI, and they said, and I asked them, so how many years have you actually been operating AI? How much training have you put into this artificial intelligence platform of yours? How many billions of nodes does it have? And I think that's where the discussion begins to differentiate. And I think the fact that we've been using and testing and training this AI platform for so many years before we released it to the marketplace is a huge differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is what I love about FortiGuard Labs and Fortinet. This is the way that we do it. We build it from the ground up. In fact, we did the same thing with Sandbox years ago, right? Before we launched Forti Sandbox, we had a sandbox in our labs that our analysts were using, that we tuned and that we continuously improved until we got those detections right. Very similar approach. We used it as a tool. Now this is that next wave, the next generation. And yeah, as you said, when it comes to FortiGuard AI, this is over 5 years in the making. I mean, to have proper artificial intelligence, which is a term a lot of people misuse or misquote or sometimes abuse in the industry, to have proper AI, AI works on machine learning. Machine learning machines learn like humans do, and it takes time, right? You need processing power. Anyone can spin up processing power nowadays. Yeah. You need data. That can be hit or miss, but we certainly have a wealth of data. I mean, according to IDC analysts, we're leading in terms of firewall ship. We have over 5 million of them worldwide. This is a core Intel network we get with FortiGuard Labs. But to your point, Jonathan, you need the time. And to us, that's over 5 years. So I really feel like we got ahead of the curve there. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the fact that Forti AI is self-learning and is ready to operate at a highly optimized level out of the box. But because it is self-learning and is designed to work in closed environments, air-gapped environments, large hyperscale data centers, global enterprises, government agencies, is the ability that even at that level of accuracy, that over time it will improve and tune into that particular environment because of its self-learning capabilities that are already baked in from day one.
Yeah, and again, I like to always use analogies in security. And when it comes to the topic of machine learning, I like just putting it into real life, right? Again, if you were just to give a giant knowledge base. So let's say thousands and thousands of page book to a newborn baby. They have the data, but they don't have the time to learn it, right? And really what you're getting with FortiGuard AI is that 5 years of experience in machine learning, which in human terms translates to a postdoctorate, right? That already has all of that knowledge and wealth of learning experience. So it's a very big advantage and a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I think Forti AI really begins to close the loop that we build around the Fortinet security fabric, right? So you start off with the ability to have a pretty broad visibility across the distributed ecosystem, from IoT, OT environments to traditional enterprise networks into hybrid cloud environments, right? And then you have the visibility and the awareness, contextual awareness comes from the AI capabilities. And then because it's a fabric that's integrated and automated, you have the ability to efficiently scale your response at speed and scale. And I think that's key because now we're essentially addressing a security problem that operates at machine speed. And up to this point, the answer about trying to address something that operates at machine speed by adding humans, which are hard to find, is just really not a practical approach. I think that we're finally beginning to close the loop, and I think we're about to change the trajectory by how we approach cybersecurity. And I'm looking forward to seeing that 77% of data breaches being identified by law enforcement to be reduced, right?
Yeah, and absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's a really good point. And the other thing that excites me about this is that, going back to that complexity theme, as I said, threats are becoming very sophisticated. They're always trying to get around security vendors, which means they're putting a lot of effort into obfuscation and into trying to trick human analysts and environment. And this is really another area where AI and FortiGuard AI really shines through, right? Because if we look at how we do this, again, working off that 5 years of knowledge base, that AI, all that machine learning that's been done, it's used to a lot of those tricks. It can identify those, which a lot of even experienced analysts have issues doing. So this is another real big advantage. It's that proverbial trying to find the needle in the haystack, right?
Well, I think you're right. I think when you mentioned the fact that the threat actors are using AI not only to develop, design, test, implement, malware and other TTP, right? So if the threat environment is utilizing AI, I think it's table stakes that if you're on the white hat side, that you've got to have the same level, if not better capabilities, because you're just not going to be able to mitigate that type of threat, right?
Yeah, and another thing that FortiGuard AI comes with is the virtual security analyst built in. So this is exactly what we're talking about. Is that up to 5 headcount? How do you put that into your SOC? Well, you can do it virtually through this virtual security analyst. And the nice thing about that is that this also helps with the whole, the whole response life cycle as well too. It's not just detection and protection, but also incident response, because it has the ability to identify, what we know about this malware, so timeline. But in that regional or that local on-premises learning environment, where did this come from? Where it has it spread to as well, and those are key things that really help when it comes to forensics, when it comes to incident response as well.
Yeah, so the equivalent of 5 full-time equivalents in a SOC, fully loaded, is about $1.25 million, right? So that gives an idea of the types of efficiencies and ROI that can be generated by using our types of products. The second factor is that in the testing and development of FortiAI, I think the research suggests that at week 34, if you matched FortiAI against a human, at week 34, the FortiAI begins to improve performance at a pace far faster than a human being does. And I think that speaks to the variability of SOC analysts, right? No matter how good they are, at a certain point, there are variabilities in how any particular person would look at that. And of course, that begins to skew the way the security incidents are identified and managed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so in my view, it's a win-win when it comes to FortiAI, and the good. And I know we talked about this before, but the obvious thing here is that if you're freeing up those cycles that the analysts would otherwise be working on, that frees them up to do other more complex tasks, to train these systems to work on the next wave of threats coming into it. It's just a healthier ecosystem overall.
Oh yeah. I think if from my experience in working in SOCs and things like that, having been a SOC monkey, you really want to have your people move towards tier 3, letting them determine which incidents need to be mitigated, how they're going to mitigate it, rather than doing the triaging typically done at tier 1, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, hey man, I've got to go because it's almost time for me to catch my flight home.
It was another great year at RSA. It's 2020 already. Can you believe that?